Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and those watching online, thank you for attending. This is a new experience, I think, for all of us. We're testing this out tonight. I think we're quasi live in the sense that we're also taking calls from people online. We obviously do not have a full commission here this evening. Please know that the commissioners that are not here are going to be viewing this, and we're going to be getting their feedback for the presentations that are going to be made here this evening. Something else, I must introduce myself. My name's John Dixon. I'm the newly appointed chairman of the Plan Commission. I have rather big shoes to fill following Chairwoman Rosemary Kerr. And she's going to be a hard act to follow. I'd also like to take a brief moment and recognize the past commissioners that have recently stepped off the Plan Commission, and like to thank them. And there'll be a time in the future here where we'll do a more formal recognition of their service. But I'd like to thank Michael Freeman, Monica Ruggles, and Susan Atheson. They each worked tirelessly for the city, and their service is much appreciated. And again, as I said, at a future date, we will recognize in a more formal matter their service to the city. With that, the first item on the agenda this evening, I'm going to turn to city staff. It is the senior cottages, which is 12 clustered residential cottages, each with a attached single-car garage on the property located on the northwest corner of Everett and Telegraph. And presenting tonight for the city is Kathy Cernak. Kathy?
Thank you, Chairman Dixon, members of the commission, members of the audience. It is good to be back in the council chambers. We've done a couple meetings, and they've all been a bit awkward, but we're getting better. Senior cottages have been discussed for many, many years, and I think just about everyone you have here in the audience has a long history of being involved with really trying to assure that the city of Lake Forest has a diversity of housing types and at a diversity of price points, really meeting the needs of all different types of families. Senior cottages were first conceived by former Alderman Tom Trop, and in fact I remember the evening when he termed off the council, stepped down from the dais, and immediately came up to talk to the council, stood at this podium, and talked about how he had been looking for a home for his elderly parents or father. And he proposed that evening that he was going to develop senior cottages. And he moved forward. I actually believe Mr. Whitmer was part of the group that worked with Tom Trop at that point, worked tirelessly, looked for a site, developed the concept, and ultimately built the 5 senior cottages that today are located on the north side of Conway Road at the north end of Telegraph Road. Those senior cottages have gone through different stages. What we came to learn was that the city really is not equipped and did not have the expertise to own and operate the senior cottages. And our partnership with Community Partners for Affordable Housing, Rob Anthony and Chase Morris are here tonight from Community Partners. Several years ago, we actually transferred ownership of the land and the senior cottages to Community Partners for Affordable Housing. And Chase, I believe, will talk a little bit later about those cottages and how they have operated successfully and really are in demand. So with that success, a few years ago, the city's Housing Trust Fund Board, of which we have the current chairman and a past chairman, I believe, of the Housing Trust Fund Board in the audience, really challenged the Senior Resources Commission and Senior Foundation to come forward with a project, with a development for seniors. And the Senior Resources Foundation and Commission, really led by Steve Pottsick, did bring forward a proposal for senior cottages. Like we did initially, we spent some time looking for the right site. We explored Grove Campus, and there were some challenges there. And ultimately, the City Council did agree, did indicate a willingness to donate the property located on the northwest corner of Everett and Telegraph Road for a senior cottage development. The project goals really to meet the need that we know is out there for seniors in our community, seniors in the area, parents of residents that live in Lake Forest, and others in the area. And really it's an opportunity to build awareness in the community of the need for housing of different types and to build partnerships within the community. A slide or two later, you'll see the various parties that are involved in this project so far. To make these types of developments work, the cost of land is really an important factor. And the reason the senior cottages that exist today worked is because the city was able to donate the land. So again, the council has indicated a willingness once we get through the process to donate this land. Just an overview, high-level overview of the development, and again, Chase Morris and Rob Anthony will speak a bit more to this. This will be age-restricted. The cottages will be configured as duplexes, as they're currently envisioned, 2 attached units for a total of 12 cottages. Ideally, we'd increase that number, but we really want to be sensitive to what fits on the site. The units will be approximately 1,300 square feet, again, very similar to the existing cottages. And as I mentioned, various partners have stepped forward to be part of the financial backing needing to make this happen. Again, Community Partners plays a major role in that they will be the entity seeking grants and tax credits to allow this development to go forward. In addition to city donation of the land, the City Council has approved, based on a recommendation from the Housing Trust Fund Board, some monies from the city's Housing Trust Fund as well. As you know, land use is really the purview of the Plan Commission, not finances, but just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that. The location, I'm not getting is on the northwest corner of Everett and Telegraph Road. You see the arrow pointing to that. It is located just across the tracks west of the Waukegan Road Business District. This property, interestingly enough, is zoned B1 for commercial development and for multifamily development. So theoretically, if the city put this property on the market, it could be developed commercially for multifamily housing. It could be a coffee shop. It could be an office building. During a recent conversation about this business district, there was much discussion about whether the zoning on the property should be changed. And there was a lot of leaning toward changing the zoning to only allow residential development on this property. The discussion really went back and forth, and ultimately the B1 zoning was left, knowing that the City Council could amend the zoning at any point. Importantly, what is proposed, senior cottages, multifamily housing, is permitted under the B1 zoning. The other important thing to note about this property, again, I mentioned the proximity to the business district. It is close to restaurants, to Sunset Foods, to a church, to existing medical office buildings and additional and planned medical office buildings. It's close to the fire station, and it is within walking distance of the train station. And at some point, we do believe that people are going to start taking the train again. Sorry, I lost my connectivity here. The conceptual site plan that is in your packet, again, shows the 12 units, all in a duplex configuration. We played with different opportunities for access, and ultimately, Public safety felt it was important to have two accesses. We looked at various plans that had one. Both of the accesses are located as far away from the intersection as possible. Immediately west of the proposed development is an existing public pedestrian pathway. We did think about whether that pathway should be eliminated and whether pedestrian traffic should be rerouted. However, what we know is that people do use that pathway. We've recently been out on the site a number of times. Every single time people are walking on that pathway. We know that in the winter, if we don't plow it, we immediately get calls. I believe it was used more when people were commuting, but it does seem to be an important amenity. And interestingly, it provides a very nice walking loop for residents in this development. There's a lot of buckthorn in the area, but there are also some significant trees that we would work to save, both oaks and hickories located to the north along the path. And we would also look to provide some landscaping to provide privacy for the units as well. Very quickly, benefits of this site. There appears to be support for this site from the Senior Resources Commission, from the Senior Foundation, from the City Council, from various entities. We've talked with some of the businesses out in that area. It isn't isolated. One of the things as we looked at Grove Campus, although there's certain amenities with cottages at Grove Campus, that site is a bit isolated. What we know is that the existing senior cottages work well and are very successful not far from this property. We do recognize there are some challenges. Certainly when both Everett School and St. Mary's is in session and when people are using the trains, we know that that intersection, Waukegan and Everett and Telegraph and Everett, do have some congestion. Certainly when trains are crossing the area, there's even more. But what we also know is that if this property were to be developed commercially or for a higher density multifamily, the site would generate much more traffic. What we do know is that the existing senior cottages generate a very low level of traffic. We did, as we talked to the City Council about this, recognize that there is an opportunity lost, the opportunity for the city to sell this property and gain revenue and have it be developed commercially and get some sales tax revenues as well. Again, you balance things all the time, as does the City Council. But given the earlier questions about the site's viability of commercial, this seems to be a very strong contender for a senior cottage development. And finally, just a quick overview of the process. You are seeing this tonight as a high-level introduction. We did provide public notice. We did a legal notice in the paper. We also direct mailed to property owners in the area and to residents in the area. With your comments tonight, we don't expect to be able to answer all your questions, but we are looking tonight for any requests you have for additional information that you want to be sure we include when we come back, any questions you have, any comments or suggestions. Once we hear that from you tonight, we will go forward, we'll develop a landscape plan, we'll proceed with preliminary engineering, we'll continue to work with community partners, and we will come back to you probably within the next month or two requesting action by this commission. At that time, we will do further public notice. To date, the city has not received any calls, emails, or letters in response to the notice that was sent out. We would probably concurrently go before the Building Review Board as well to review the design aspects of the buildings themselves and the landscape plan. Once we have a recommendation from both the Plan Commission and Building Review Board, we would go forward to the City Council for action on those recommendations. And then we'd be looking at, once grants and tax credits are secured, and once we hear from community partners that they are poised to move forward, we would look at the property transfer, and our goal would be construction in the spring of 2022. So with that, I'm going to ask Rob. Anthony, I think, is going to speak first. He's going to provide you with a little bit more background. Rob and Chase are the experts. on this type of development. So I want to turn it over to them.
Before you turn it over to them, should we take a moment if any of the commissioners have any questions for you, or should we wait until, what do you think is
I
best?
think wait until Rob and Chase have an opportunity, and then you can ask questions of all three of us.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rob Anthony. I'm the president of Community Partners for Affordable Housing. I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes about Community Partners for Affordable Housing to give you some context and a little bit about the existing senior cottages. And then I'll turn it over to Chase Morris, who's our vice president of real estate development, who's going to talk a little bit more about the units that are being proposed. So SEPA is a nonprofit organization that specifically works to enhance the diversity of housing throughout Lake County and northern Cook County. We were once three separate nonprofit housing organizations, one that was initiated by the Lake County Board, one that was initiated by the City of Highland Park, and then a third that was initiated by the Lake County Housing Authority. Those three entities came together in January of 2019 and merged in order to expand our capacity to create more housing opportunities and provide more and better services to the residents. Our office is located in Libertyville. We have helped develop or preserve over 1,800 units of housing throughout Lake County, northern Cook County, and a little bit in McHenry County. Those units range from single-family homes to smaller developments, senior cottage developments, smaller apartment buildings, up to 120-unit apartment buildings. And our experience includes new construction, both stick-build on-site construction as well as modular construction, and also acquisition rehabilitation work and adaptive reuse. We currently manage about 100 rental units in-house. Those are the smaller developments and scattered site rental units that we have, and then we have separate on-site property management staff for the larger developments that we have. In addition to the typical property management services that you might see, we also have a whole range of other housing-related services. We are a HUD-certified housing counseling agency, so we work with tenants and homeowners. We provide rental assistance, we provide a match savings program, other types of supports to make sure that residents are successful. Our mission is to serve the community and serve the residents and build long-term housing stability. We partner with a number of different municipalities on helping communities meet their housing needs and goals. We have had a very long and successful history of working with the City of Lake Forest in a variety of ways, including the 5 senior cottages that are just down the street from this proposed site. As Kathy mentioned, those 5 units have been very successful. There is tremendous demand for those units. The residents are very happy in those units. There simply aren't other affordable options for seniors in Lake Forest, particularly of a cottage design like this that people really like. The units fit into the neighborhood extremely well. People can access the community amenities that are nearby, as close to transportation. And they're well liked by the residents. The one problem that we have is that there simply aren't enough units. There are only 5 units there. We took over management of those units in 2013. I think we've had 2 unit turnovers in that time. The majority of the residents have been there since the development was initially completed in 2001. There isn't a lot of turnover, and we get calls all the time for these units. So I'll turn it over to Chase, and he can tell you a little bit more about the proposed sites at the expanded site.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of the faces in person. It's been a while. It feels good to kind of get outside and kind of see some people. Thank you for having us this evening. As Rob mentioned, these will be 12 units. Kathy also mentioned approximately 1,300 square feet. SEPA, we're about providing quality product. In terms of unit amenities, we're looking to provide prospective tenants with energy efficient appliances in the unit. And so that's going to include refrigerators, microwave, oven, dish. We're going to also do washer and dryer as well. You also, as you already know, one car attached garage, outdoor patio space as well. We're all about providing a quality space for people to feel comfortable to live in. We're perpetuity owners, and we believe in what we do and in providing a product that is clearly in need and in high demand. Energy efficiency, just to kind of emphasize that point, is a very key component because we want to provide electrical, products, electronics that are low cost to maintain, but also quality that really minimizes the utility impact on the household. And so we're really looking forward to providing a great product I think was going to add value to the housing stock of Lake Forest. So that will conclude our part of the presentation. Any questions or comments about that?
Thank you. I would be remiss, I forgot at the beginning of, this is just an information only, as Kathy has said and stressed. We will take some comments from some of the folks here if they're interested in making comments on this project as well as the next project. I also be remiss if I didn't introduce my new commissioners here. To my left is Barrett Davey, who is here with us this evening. We also have two other new commissioners that are joined our commission, Louis Pickus and Mark Pasquesi, who are not here this evening. But with that, I will open it up for questions, and I will turn over to Commissioner Moorhead. Do you have any questions for the petitioner, either the city or the gentleman from SEPA?
Yeah, I just have a couple. One for staff. Kathy, just to confirm what we're being asked or what we will be asked to review, I think in the staff report, it mentioned a plat of consolidation and then an FAR bonus for extra density and then a possible variance on parking. Is that correct?
It is correct. The density bonus may not be necessary, but we do know that there may be a variance from the Everett Road setback, but we're still working through that.
Okay. Okay, and then question for staff or SEPA. What is a working definition of a cottage? Like how would you define that? Is it a townhouse or?
Please come to the microphone.
A cottage, what we've found is there are a lot of seniors who don't want to go into a large apartment building where you go into a common entry, go down long hallways, maybe go up a story or two, and they're really looking for more of a feel of a mini home. And so there's a direct access to the outside. You have your own parking, your own outdoor space. Okay. And these would be structured as duplexes. And so, again, you'd be having one shared wall and then going out on each side from that.
Okay. And then my last question, the proposed height, how tall might they be in stories or feet?
That's a great question. So as of right now, we have not finalized building height just yet.
Okay.
But I would imagine they would be very comparable to what we currently have now.
Okay.
And you have to forgive me, I don't know the exact height of our existing senior cottages, but it definitely kind of one story. I don't know if you have the exact dimensions on that, but we can
talk about it
that
further at another meeting. But
yeah, we can
I was
definitely
just
provide
curious.
the exact height for you, but definitely
It's
very
a
comparable
one-story
to-
structure, though?
Correct, yeah, a one-story structure, and I would imagine it'd be very similar to what we currently have now.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
I'll ask a couple of questions here. Commissioner Moore had asked the question on the variance. Kathy, you mentioned the pedway, pedestrian pathway. Is there any talk, or would there be any talk to enhancing that, doing any changes to that for not only the west side of town and that area over there off of Telegraph, but also for the development itself?
Again, we've walked it recently, and I walked it very recently with the city arborist. The path is quite wide. It's wider than a standard 5-foot. We thought about reconfiguring it, but the configuration as it winds through the area there seems to be appropriate. Certainly, we've talked about cleaning it up. There is a lot of buckthorn. I think we could really enhance it from a landscaping perspective, but there hasn't been any discussion about lighting it, for instance, or doing anything. We did recently add, at the point where the pedestrian walkway intersects with Everett, we did recently add one of those pedestrian crossing signs in the middle of the street. You might have noticed it. So to really acknowledge that that's a mid-block crossing, which wasn't ideal. I will note that the road within this development and the walkways will all be private. So we really wanted to be careful about directing a public pedestrian pathway into the development and through the development. There is still a sidewalk, and there will remain a sidewalk on the north side of Everett Road and on the west side of Telegraph Road. So there's a number of pedestrian connections throughout there, but we didn't talk about any other specific enhancements to that walkway.
And thank you. And then my next question was, there was, this housing is going to be available to Lake Forest and Lake Bluff citizens. And I saw it seemed like there was somewhat of a placeholder, not only in the material, but also in the presentation in terms of the contribution by Lake Bluff. And not to get into that right now, but is that going to be clarified as we continue forward in this process?
Yes, we've had good discussions with the Village of Lake Bluff, and those discussions are continuing. There is interest, and we'll continue to talk about that, and then also how to, if in fact there is a financial contribution, which in part there is already, because the Senior Citizens Foundation is actually the Lake Forest and Lake Bluff Senior Citizens Foundation, and that group will be helping to financially support this project. But discussions with Lake Bluff are continuing around financing and around how those priorities work, where Lake Bluff residents or parents of Lake Bluff families fall in the priority list.
And that's going to be, more clarity on that is going to come as this process moves forward?
Yes.
Fair enough. I have no other questions. Commissioner Davey?
Make sure this works, okay.
Yeah.
I think my fellow commissioners asked good questions relating to scope, or at least within the remit of the Plan Commission. My question kind of goes more towards just, the need for senior housing in the community. And I just wondered if you had an idea as to what the kind of average duration has been for the residents of the units that you've managed over the last several years. What's that turnover? I know in the packet it said that they're very rarely available, but it didn't really get into any specifics on that type of information.
Yeah, absolutely. So, SEPA took over, I want to say in 2013 it was, and at that time we experienced kind of the initial turnover of 2 tenants. Since that point, we have not experienced unit turnover. And so, for us, that kind of is an indication internally that there's a tremendous demand for the product, the quality of product, and tenants love the home to the point where they don't naturally want to leave on their own merit. And so I think that's a very positive factor.
Great. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. At this time, we'll take public testimony. Is there anybody here in the audience, or is there anybody calling in?
And I would like to just read the phone number. I know we have at least one caller who's waiting by the phone. The call-in number is 847-810-2814. 3689. And we'll pause just a moment. There we go. I feel like I'm on a game show. This is Kathy. Steve? Hello? Hold on just a moment.
Wrong number?
Can you please turn down the volume on your TV or computer so we don't get feedback? Okay. Mr. Pottsick, you're on with the commission.
All right, well, thank you so much. My name is Steve Pottsick, and I live at 1100. I thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening, and I am certainly testifying in support of the development of the additional 12 senior cottages. My background is that I served on the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Resources Commission, which is commonly known as the SRC, from 2013 to 2019, and was appointed by the mayor as its chair during my last 3 years. Since 2014, I have also served on the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Citizens Foundation, and I currently serve as its president. The role of the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Resources Commission is actually mandated by a city ordinance, and it is to determine the needs of local seniors and, importantly, make recommendations to meet those needs. To fulfill its mandate, the SRC held public meetings, coordinated Dickinson Hall membership meetings, received staff reports, supported community organization surveys, reviewed emails, members had personal communications with community leaders, and most importantly, engaged the city in the deliberations very directly. Initially, when we were, I'm talking about the SRC, was looking at the potential of additional senior cottages, we really didn't know where to go. And so Kathy Cerniak was so valuable in giving us an initial roadmap to pursue what kind of actions might be necessary to determine what the need might be and how to go about meeting that need. In addition, we found substantial support from the Housing Trust Fund Board, who was very encouraging of doing this, and kept noting that, you know, the senior cottages, the original senior cottages, are 20 years old, and no additional housing for seniors has been developed since those 20 years. In addition, as you heard from Rob Anthony and Chase Morris today, community partners were extremely valuable. Their experience, their history, what works, what doesn't work, how to get funding was critical to our review. In addition, at that same time, the city of Lake Forest and the village of Lake Bluff actually had community surveys of residents. And through these surveys, it highlighted the need for additional housing for older residents. For the current 5 Lake Forest senior cottages, which, as you've heard, is located about 2 blocks north from this proposed development, there's always been a substantial waiting list. Not only was there a turnover of only a couple cottages in the last, 7-8 years, but through our deliberations, I kept asking periodically, what was the waiting list? Because I would go to meetings, I would have people ask me, and my notes have shown that the low of the number of seniors on application waiting list was 18, but the high was 40. At one time, 40 seniors were on the waiting list for the 5 cottages. I also want to stress, this is without any marketing. How would it be ethical to market something that would be so rarely available? So with the 12 cottages that would be proposed, we would obviously do more marketing, because that would be a great opportunity for seniors to potentially get a cottage living in the area. So after all of this information and consideration was done, the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Resources Commission determined that there was a substantial need for the additional senior cottages and has worked diligently to recommend and support a public-private partnership to address the need. I would also like to recognize in the audience members of the foundation and SRC who are here to support the development, but are not planning to testify. Kathy Waldeck and Jill Rosa. I respectfully request that the Plan Commission, after they have completed the review process, that it will support the development of this much-needed additional 12 senior cottages. I thank you for giving your valuable time and service to our community, and I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Postic. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. I'm going to hang up on you now. Steve?
Are there any other comments, questions? Yes, please. Please state your name.
Good evening. I'm Gail Stringer Wayne. I live at 340 Western. And I have been on the SRC Senior Resource Commission since 2016. I'm currently the chair of the Senior Resource Commission. And I think this kind of speaks to what Commissioner Davey was asking about. I have a letter here that I was asked to read from somebody who is on that waiting list. And so if you will indulge me, it's a short letter. To whom it may concern, I am a 94-year-old senior who has lived in Lake Forest for more than 45 years. During that time, I've raised a family of 5 daughters, been employed locally, and continue to worship in Lake Forest. I'm at a point where my assets have been eroded over time due to skyrocketing costs for housing, medical care, taxes, and general living expenses. It is a challenge to balance these financial demands on Social Security alone. I believe I represent many seniors in Lake Forest who have been made to make hard choices every month on how to spend dollars. A few years ago, I applied to the waiting list for the senior cottages on Conway Road, but remain on that list as turnover there is virtually nil. I urge you and the city of Lake Forest to move ahead on the senior housing project considered for Telegraph and Everett. It's hard to express how impactful and needed this housing alternative is by so many of us who have spent decades of time and resources in Lake Forest. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration on this matter. And then I would request that I not say the person's name or address, but Kathy has copies of this letter to hand out to you and the other commissioners. But I think this just kind of goes to speak to the fact that there are an untold number of seniors in this community who basically can no longer afford the market prices. And for those people, their only option many times is to have to move out of the community. So again, I appreciate your time and your consideration of the matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Lemieux. I live at 560 Evanston Avenue in Lake Bluff, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. I served on the SRC from 2006 to 2013, and like Steve, was appointed by the City Council as chairman of that commission from 2011 to 2013. I've served on the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Citizens Foundation since 2015 and served as its president from 2017 until May of this year when I completed my 4-year term limit, and I currently serve as its vice president. On behalf of the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Citizens Foundation, I offer our support for the proposed construction of additional senior cottages. As Steve has said, the role of the SRC is to identify and find resolutions to address the needs of seniors in our community, and retaining seniors in our community and providing them with a place to live independently is a critical need. The role of the Senior Citizens Foundation, which is a not-for-profit 5013C entity, is threefold. One is to create awareness in the community of the interests and needs of senior citizens. The second is to support the activities and facilities of the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Senior Center, otherwise known as Dickinson Hall. And the third is to provide material and financial support to the SRC. In other words, we're the funding arm of the SRC. The foundation board is made up of leaders in our community and include the former mayor of Lake Forest, Howard Kerr, former alderman Kathy Waldeck, who's here with us tonight, Jerry Henry, and until his untimely passing, Roger Moore, former Lake Bluff village trustees, Mark Dewart and myself, former Shields Township Supervisor, Gail, along with many others like Jill, who have a long history of service to our community. Based on the success of the original 5 cottages and the clear need for additional cottages, the foundation has enthusiastically and unanimously approved significant funding for this project. Our contribution represents a fairly sizable chunk of our assets. Additionally, the foundation has a long and successful history with the city of Lake Forest in public-private partnerships. We funded a number of things jointly with the city in terms of matching funds, and so hope to see that done again with this project. And like Steve, I'm hopeful that once you've completed your deliberations, you'll be able to support this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tom Morsch. I live at 805 Oakwood Avenue in Lake Forest. I was formerly a member of the Plan Commission. I've also been a member of the City Council. I was formerly the chairman of the Housing Trust Fund here in Lake Forest, and I currently serve on the board of the Illinois Housing Development Authority, appointed by the current governor. I'm here to speak because you can look at that resume and see that housing has been a passion. It's been a passion of mine because I think it is a critical component for Lake Forest, and I think it's been an integral component of the success of Lake Forest. We have always had a welcoming community. We've had a diversity of housing stock, and today, and only with baby boomers like myself getting older, we already have 23% of our citizens are seniors, are over 65. And so this need is going to continue to grow. I was fortunate to be involved in looking at this property many years ago. So this has been a topic that's been one that has been a city issue of what do we do with these properties? Do we, and the choice, you could sell the property as Kathy indicated, but being able to monetize this property and use the value to create housing for our citizens is just a tremendous use. And I'm so thrilled to be here and see this come to reality. And especially with the partners that are developing it. Between SEPA, I forgot to mention I served on the board at SEPA for a period of time as well. But a non-for-profit organization, and having the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff seniors engaged effectively as the developers of this project is just tremendous. This is not a private developer. This is non-for-profit entities with only the goal of trying to meet the needs of these seniors. So I'm just so thrilled to be able to speak to this. I hope that you will gather all the facts you need. I hope you will consider this, and we're happy to, I know everybody here is happy to give you whatever data you need in your deliberations, and hopefully will ultimately result in a successful outcome. So thank you for this opportunity. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morsch. Are there any others that wish to speak? Thank you to all those that came forward. At this point, are there any final questions for any of the commissioners? I guess we'll now close comment.
And I would just ask if, it doesn't have to be tonight, if, as you're thinking about this, as you're driving by the site, if you think of specific questions, if If you have comments or ideas, if there's specific information you want to make sure that we have when we come back, please don't hesitate to call or email me. We'll be working diligently to put everything together and come back to you as soon as possible.
Great.
Just one other question, I think you answered this, but the neighbors in the area over there were notified of tonight's meeting, is that correct?
Correct. We did a direct mailed notice to properties to the west, to the north, and to the south. We also notified businesses in the area, and to date, we have not received any contacts regarding this petition.
Thank
We
you,
will do further notification as this comes back to you.
thank you. Clearly, there's support for what seems like a great project and certainly filling a need here in the city. And I'm sure we'll have more questions as we go forward at the next meeting. But thank you for all the comments, and thank you for all those that are here this evening and have spoken tonight on behalf of the Senior Cottage project. The next item on our agenda this evening is the redevelopment of the Midwest Bank site located on the southwest corner of Deer Path and Bank Lane. Currently, that address is 241 Deer Path, with a mixed-use development, commercial on the first floor and residential on the second and third floors, with below-grade parking, which is proposed. The property owner is the Midwest Bank Corporation, and the representative here this evening for the petitioner is Peter Whitmer.
And Mr. Chairman, as Mr. Whitmer is setting up, I just want to note, this is really a reintroduction for, I believe Commissioner Moorhead and Commissioner Dixon were on the commission in September 2020 when this was brought before. It just seemed appropriate to do a restart, reintroduce. There's still much work to be done on this. We're waiting for various studies, but we just want to gather the facts and get everyone on the same page. I will note that the commissioners who couldn't be in attendance tonight are either watching a live stream or will follow up and watch the meeting, so they will also be up to speed.
And again, this is informational only this evening. No action is being taken. And also, as on the previous item on the agenda, neighbors were notified of tonight's meeting in regards to this project.
They were, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Whitmer?
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to show you this project again. It's been I just changed the date from when it was, so I think it was about a year and a few months ago. So a lot has changed in the world since then. One is it's nice to be here again to see everybody in person, which I think is a really great thing. Although it is kind of rare that we don't have everybody in the audience, so I'm not sure what happened.
There's thousands and thousands of people watching, I'm sure, Mr. Whitmer.
And that's great. So I'm just last time I'm going to kind of just give you an overview because I know there's new board members who are not here that are watching and will see it. So I'm going to run through things that we talked about in the last meeting. This is the site in town. It's a primary site. We are very excited. Actually, we probably started negotiating for this site probably 7 or 8 years ago. This is not a new. We thought 7 or 8 years ago this was a great site for multifamily mixed-use development, and it took a while to get it under contract so that we could move forward with this. The site is very walkable for everything. We find that out with other projects that the proximity to the train, grocery stores, restaurants, drugstores, all those things, super important for this kind of condo type development. So we're excited about that. The existing site's a little over a half acre, has a 2-story building on it. There's 3 curb cuts. There's one off of Deer Path, which is a one-way that feeds into the drive-throughs, and then there's 2 curb cuts on Bank Lane. one in and one out, which serve the parking lot and the exit for the drive-throughs. Most of the site's covered with paving. We're in the middle of doing a historic report on the site itself. It has an interesting history as the rest of Lake Forest and how it's evolved through time and really came up with what it is today and how we move forward to it. To the west was a site that was redeveloped, the 225 East Deer Path building. I don't know, I still kind of refer to it as the Gap building because I think the Gap was the first tenant in there. So that site was developed, and then to the south it has the 580 Bank Lane, which was developed in the 60s, which is a 3-story apartment building. And then across the street, obviously Northern, and the parking lot and diagonal is the arcade, and then across the street are 2 older buildings. And then we're obviously at City Hall, diagonal from the site. What we're proposing is a 3-story building with 1 curb cut at the southern entrance on the east side on Bang Lane, and underground parking underneath the entire site. It's the site circulation in terms of vehicular. There was a task force that was created that looked at the not only the pedestrian walkways, the traffic circulation from Deer Path, basically from Western to Green Bay Road. And one of the things that came out of that study was the thought process of moving the Bank Lane, while it's one-way going north of Deer Path, to make it one-way going south. So I think what we're reviewing with this, and we'll do with our traffic consultant, is have them look at that and give us some insight into their thought process in the safety aspects and the usability aspects of this. Our proposal doesn't base itself on that actually having to happen, but we think that might be a good idea. But we could continue to have 2-way traffic. We are, whether we have 1 or 2-way traffic, we're proposing that we have angle parking on Bank Lane, much like we have going down Western Avenue, and we've always expanded that going north as things have gotten redeveloped north of town. It does a bunch of different things for us. One is it increases our parking spaces, surface parking for customers of the businesses. It also slows down traffic so that people don't drive as fast typically on angled type parking. So that's what we're proposing on our site plan. And then the other piece would be that the entrance into the garage at the south east corner of the site, it's the lowest point on the site. So the site falls about 5 feet or 6 feet from the upper edge here to here, so we don't have to make up that difference. And also then just has 1 point of ingress and egress. And really this ingress in the corner of the site is fairly dangerous for pedestrians in that the idea of the one-way street is that pulling out into this intersection is a hazardous type situation for pedestrians and for traffic. I think they've had some preliminary discussion about that with local police, and the city staff has looked at that. The pedestrian circulation of the site, we've studied the Deer Path streetscape. What we're proposing there is that our project would then step back to the 5-foot step back and really have a landscape piece between the sidewalk and the building, and then keep the parkway landscape that will have enhanced along the Deer Path edge. This is a lot like the building to the west. It has a landscape piece, which the newer buildings do, versus sitting the building right on the sidewalk. We'd like to have a piece at the corner that understands and has some relationship to the corner, so that we'd have 2 sets of pedestrian ways that go on the east side of the building. One would follow a sidewalk outside that would follow the grade down and connect up to the sidewalk to the south of the building, and in that manner. And then one would be an arcade that you would walk outside, but underneath a roofed covering, that you could come upstairs and into these pieces, come in from a handicap accessibility, come in from the end, and then have stairs at the end. And then the possibility of having sort of this outdoor gathering space at the southern end of this piece. So we'd have a stair up from the parking, so if you wanted to get into the building from these parking spaces, you could come up. Not too different than the building to the west. It has a walkway underneath its building and then has a sidewalk out at the street. We think this is a great way to introduce landscape and still have sort of an outside-inside kind of relationship to the streetscape. Just in open spaces then, we have the open space that's created by the setbacks on the east side, this end space at the southern end. And then the other thing I would mention in our, and then obviously the covered walkway that connects from the corner down to the south. And then in the units themselves in the upper level, it's very important that to people who are buying these units to have personal outdoor spaces. And I think that's become more and more important to developing these units for that, so that we would have those on different levels. This is just a schematic of the floor plan. What we would have would be a level of underground parking. As I mentioned, there's a lot of things that has sort of worked into our favor. Drive-throughs are not near as important to banks as they once were. So where the original bank has 3 or 4 of them, the new requirements, part of our contract agreement is that First Midwest will occupy the first floor in the northeast corner of the building. So they'll basically be, this is the first floor here, so that they'll have about 3,000 square feet of space. So much smaller footprint than they currently have. And they really only need one drop-off or drive-through, and that we can locate that underneath in the bank, underneath the building. And so that's how we can provide that service without sort of having this whole separate circulation piece and canopy that would be in sort of a more typical type drive-through situation. So we'd have a level here of parking that would be for the commercial space. And then the idea is that we would have a second level underneath this, which would take care of the condo parking underneath this level. So we basically have a level and 3/4 of parking to handle our parking requirement for the overall site. We really feel like this is we're just looking at the solution. We're going to have our traffic engineers study the turning radiuses, the access, all that to give his evaluation on this this idea. The first floor, this is one of the changes that we had from our original scheme that we had. We had talked about having some residential on the first floor, and I think that gave us probably 80% of the comments that we had. And I think the driver was that one is we didn't feel that we needed more commercial space, office, mercantile space in the CBD. That's changed a little bit for us. And the other thing is that I think that it is problematic to have first floor residential without much views. They're pretty difficult in terms of those spaces. So we've gone back to having the bank at the corner, a larger office mixed use in the corner, and then another rental space on the west edge, which is about 1,500 square feet. So the first floor would be all commercial office use. Then above that, we would have two levels of condominiums. We're looking at, as I said before, we would step the building back so that, because the outdoor space is so important to the units. It's really become a huge thing. It's, while condominiums have been very popular, the ones that are popular are ones with either large outside balconies or terraces or rooftops. So you can see that we've stepped this back on this is our schematic of the second 2 floors. and created outdoor terraces for the second level. We have the outdoor terraces on the Bank Lane side, but we don't on the Deer Path side. I think the thought process there is really to make them more residential, where you see the balconies. That would be on the Bank Lane side versus the Deer Path side. And then on the upper level, then we would utilize the roof plane to have the upper units in private rooftop spaces that they would access from the third floor from their units inside. We're thinking around 10 to 14 units, varying in size from 2,000 to 3,000 square feet, something like that, in terms of the overall scale of the units. We're working with a consultant right now to sort of nail down what we think. We think we want to have a varied size. We originally were thinking more of all the units being a very similar size, and I think we've come to the realization that that's probably not a good idea. We should have some variation in terms of the size in their location, because the site is pretty unique. Let's see, in terms of each piece and what views they have out. So there's some more obviously the corner sites where you're looking at markets, or this building and the other buildings are more popular, where in some of the back units are a little more challenged in terms of the views for them. I think that's it for yeah, so that's just a general overview of this. So as I say, we'd like to get your input and then hopefully move forward to the HPC in terms of some schematic designs with them and get their reviews in our next process, so that we can get their input and then come back to you with more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitmer. Identification of any issues from the staff? Kathy?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project, as it's currently configured, will need to be reviewed through a special use permit process. There is a opportunity in the code that allows for increased floor area if you have residential on the second and third floor. So we would anticipate considering this through a special use permit to take advantage of that available bonus. Parking, as Mr. Whitmer said, a parking study is being done, which will also address circulation. It's possible that a parking variance may be required, but it also may not. It may be that the project can accommodate the required number of parking spaces on site. As Mr. Whitmer noted, the proposed reconfiguration of Bank Lane would add some public parking spaces. And then finally, I believe that a height variance would need to be requested from the Historic Preservation Commission, again, as the project is currently configured. As Mr. Whitmer noted, I guess about 18 months ago now, maybe longer, an ad hoc Deer Path Streetscape Committee was convened, and that committee walked Deer Path from Oakwood to Western. We had public information sessions in this room. That group had a number of meetings, and there was a lot of interest in looking at how to reduce congestion on Deer Path. And that's where the concept of perhaps making Forest Avenue one-way north and Bank Lane one-way south on the south side of Deer Path, which would eliminate any left turn movements or even any right turn movements onto Deer Path between Oakwood and Western Avenue. As that group was discussing it, the police department, because they went out one day and kind of took over that stretch of Bank Lane, and they parked their vehicles on the west side, kind of as proposed in this plan, and actually for a morning had that portion of Bank Lane be one way. The police department really is very supportive of that idea and the notion of diagonal parking. People do have trouble parallel parking. We hear that constantly. And the ability to add some spaces and really help to ease that congestion on Deer Path seems to be a notion that has some interest. And so as we were in early discussions with the developer, we really encouraged them to incorporate that concept into their project. Other than that, again, we want to bring this to you early, hear any particular concerns, any questions, any requests for particular studies. There is more work to do on this, and there will be an official submittal, and we'll bring it back to you for a formal public hearing probably in the next 30 to 60 days. I would be happy to answer any questions.
I'll ask a question and start off the questioning. Kathy, just where you left off in regards to Bank Lane, would that be south all the way to Vine or stop at Illinois?
Actually, we're also in discussions with, separate from this
Yeah,
petition.
and this might be digressing a little from the
Well,
current petition.
it feeds into the whole concept.
Right.
Some of the residents on the west side of Bank Lane, between Illinois and Vine, we walk Bank Lane often with them to really think about how we can enhance that. And they are very interested in the idea of making it one way all the way from Deer Path to Vine to really curtail some of that back and forth traffic on that narrow roadway.
Some of those residents have been before this commission, if you recall that, so that's why I asked. So that is included, or the thought process would be to keep it south all the way to Vine?
Yes.
Okay. My questions, to Mr. Whitmer, parking obviously I think is going to be a key component to the discussion as this moves forward. I'm sure in your discussion in regards to the lower level and the teller unit under there, the bank is on board with that concept, and but the flow down there and how that's going to work, I'm sure there'll be some discussion points on that. The more data you have on that, I'm sure that would be beneficial to the rest of the commission. And then the number of spaces for the site, I'm sure there'll be some discussion around that, I would anticipate. Also, I know the last time this came up, it was the terraces that were and where those were located. And I think for clarification, I might ask you, those would be not on Deer Path, those would be on Bank Lane, is that correct?
Yes, that's what our plans are.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I would anticipate there'd probably be a few questions in regards to those and how those fit in. And Kathy mentioned the height. Obviously, there's nothing before us in regards to that, but I would anticipate some questions on that.
Yeah, and I think we're anticipating heights similar to what Kelmscott had gotten
north end of
received in
town.
terms. Yeah, I think just building a modern building. I mean, achieving the ceiling heights that are really required in a new modern spaces, can't be achieved with the existing height. So yeah, but I do think. We've looked at it in terms of compatibility of the buildings it's surrounding. So we feel like it fits within the context that it's not going to stick up above Northern or the Arcade or the other buildings in the close proximity of that.
And you didn't mention it, but is there any issue with the recent publicly announced transaction with First Midwest and Old National?
No, we're close discussion with them. We talked to them actually today, and no, they're anxious to get moving forward with this.
So it's not
so there's not a. I mean, they would like to get an approval before their merger, just in case there was anything, which is not coming. I think at the end of this year.
Right.
But no, I think their merger would be. This would support that idea. There are no banks. It's not like they're merging with a bank that's currently in town or anything.
Okay. I have no other questions. I'll turn to Commissioner Davey.
Thank you. Just one question or maybe just a comment. I mean, I imagine you probably will get some questions specific to the number of units and what the basis is for that, and as that relates to, you know, the density and then how that impacts parking. That's something that came to mind, so just wondered how you came up with that.
Yeah, and you know, it works in a bunch of different ways. One is it creating units that people want to buy? And so that's probably one of the first things that we look at is it providing a product that, you know, as the senior housing project is an aging population of Lake Forest, there's a real demand here for larger units, and we see that. And we've actually engaged a consultant with us to help us guide us through that. And then I think that falls then into providing the parking for those kinds of units that we're providing. But so I think, you know, this isn't our first go at this, so which is kind of nice because we're trying to make it at a lower price point than our other project to get some more people to be able to do it, because we see a fair number of people who just don't have the resources to do what we're doing in the other one. So I think that's really where we're trying to target this, and we're getting support from our consultants and some other things that looks like there's a pretty strong demand in our community for this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moorhead?
Thank you. Just a few questions. First is for Kathy. I asked this the last time we talked about this, but it was at the end of the night and we ran out of time. Residential in the CBD, I thought the city's intent was to move it out of the CBD generally. Just a question, what is the comprehensive plan call for, so on?
The comprehensive plan doesn't speak specifically to moving residential out of the CBD. It did speak specifically to moving office and any retail west of the railroad tracks. The commercial zoning districts do allow, in fact, provide a bonus for providing residential units in the CBD. There was the thought that we've lost an awful lot. Now, in some counts, and I don't know where people started counting, but much of the central business district, the second floor, years ago used to be units, smaller units, probably lower priced, but by some people's count, we've lost 100 or so units over decades in the central business district. So there is no prohibition. In fact, residential around and in the central business district is encouraged.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Another question I asked last time, the underground, I think it's going to be an ATM. Is that the general idea? Mm-hmm. I asked if you had any examples in other buildings anywhere, because I can't think of one. The traffic is an issue, but also security. And maybe this is a bank issue and not a developer issue, but having an ATM underground seems like a potential place for robbery. Have you considered that at all, or has that come up?
All I know is, you know, our hurdle was Midwest Bank in terms of proposing this originally, and so we were. They are very thorough in their. I mean, they have enough banks they're not a small banking thing, and so they have a very high comfort level of putting this underground, which quite honestly, I was kind of surprised that they were doing it, and we just confirmed that again today. They can't see the stack time or the stack more than 3 cars ever in their ATMs backed up, and I think you see that, you know, just as I very rarely go to the drive-through, but you know, I'll go to across the street and watch. And so the use of a drive-through is not security. I mean, with cameras and those sorts of things. But I'll try to find if they have a bank with something underneath that. I'm sure in a more urban area that would be more typical.
Yeah.
And so I'll try to get some information on that. But I think they're very aware of all their security issues, and fairly confident that they're, you know, if we meet their needs, they'd be pretty comfortable with that.
Okay. My next question is on the existing building. It sounds like the intent is to tear it down. I'm just looking at the Preservation Foundation's memo, which is asking for consideration of an adaptive reuse. I'll ask you, can you do, is it economically feasible to do an adaptive reuse of the existing building? And if not, could you, have you considered keeping the facade? And then part B to that question is, are there any tax credits available if they were to reuse the facade at the federal or state level, do you know? I know I just threw out a lot at you.
I can answer. So we're working with we're working with Susan Benjamin, who's an expert in both those areas, really, with tax credits and that. And I think the idea of reusing some pieces of the building, where actually, when you really look at the building and you really go in and examine it, it isn't much of an original building. They basically built on all four sides around it and added addition on one side and moved the front door from one side to the other and moved things around. But we do have this idea of reusing the entrance. The really most significant piece of that in our thought process is the front door. The arched opening in that is really, and we'd like to integrate that into the new elevation. So in some ways, we're working with that idea in developing that to have some sort of history of what it was.
Okay.
Because it is fascinating to see how the site is transformed from dirt to today, as all Lake Forest is. Some of it was pretty, some of it was not so pretty, and how it's gone through all the years. So I think the idea of preserving some piece of it, I don't know that, and I'll ask Susan if there any tax advantage of something. It's pretty difficult to build 2 stories of underground parking underneath a facade like that to make it any kind of feasibility of that. It'd be very difficult.
It has its challenges, yeah. And my last question, the roof, it sounds like you're proposing rooftop decks. Is that right?
Yeah, terraces.
Okay.
Deck sounds a little bit more, not as
Like
terraces
Wrigleyville?
seem- yeah.
So question for Kathy, outside of the Phase 3 McKinley or the McKinley generally, are there any other examples of rooftop decks in the city? Because I could be wrong, but I can't really think of any right now.
I can't think of any, but I will tell you that we are seeing rooftop decks really increasing in popularity. I certainly see it in planning literature. I certainly see it happening in surrounding communities. It, in the past, has been more of an urban concept, but in drawing people into our central business district, I believe the roof decks that we do have on McKinley have been very successful, and we hear all the time that that's such an amenity. So I think it's just something that is now of interest to potential buyers or renters.
Okay. Okay, that's very helpful. I think that's all I have for now.
I just have a couple of follow-up questions. And going back to, Peter, you said that you were going to go back to First Midwest and find out data that they might have on underground drive-throughs. Could you also find out how many drive-throughs they've closed, or whether the drive-throughs in general are on a decline? My rationale or thinking on that I'll share with you is that maybe assuming the project gets built, that maybe the whole drive-through concept is a short-lived phenomenon anyway, because banking is moving away from drive-throughs, and eventually everything is more electronic and online. So that's where I was going with that thought process, and it'd be interesting to know that data and see if that's trending in that way. And again, it's just sort of a nice to have.
I think one of the nice things about that, and I think it's a really good point, is that to design the drive-through so they can be parking spaces in the future. As opposed to like over in Bank of America, where it becomes parking spaces under a drive-through. This is actually basically put a stripe in, you get 2 more parking spaces. So, I think that adaptive reuse would be really easily, at least the way we have it configured now. So I think that idea would be a good one. And it is kind of an adaptive reuse like that. Much better than if we were building like
An
a
outdoor,
whole canopy and a whole drive-through, and then just like how it is over there.
At B of A, it's a parking. I've seen
It doesn't make
cars
any
parked
sense,
in
right?
the stall.
Yeah. So I think that's
It'd
that's
be
what I really
interesting.
like about what we're proposing, because it
Sure,
is
is that it
independent of that.
has a
Yeah.
reuse at a later date. And then my other comment was, I can think of over at the Market House, there used to be that second floor terrace there that people could sort of sit outside on the second floor that was on Bank Lane. So that maybe answers your question, Commissioner Moorhead. Although not residential, certainly sort of a second floor terrace that at one point I know was on Bank Lane. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think as an amenity to these units and really as people leave from large single-family houses, typically to these things, having that larger space that you go out, and you know, it's just another place to enjoy Lake Forest from a place above that you haven't ever seen it from that perspective. It's really an amenity. And as Kathy said, I don't know if people who have been out to Walnut Creek, or Cherry Creek in a suburb in Denver, it is immense. Every project has rooftop, whether they're single-family residents or whatever. I mean, that's, that is just a part of the new culture and the new building for that. So I think it really makes a really inviting type environment to live for that.
one other point just on that, and I remember this just came to me the last time this came up. I looked around town, and I would encourage the fellow commissioners to do so in terms of second stories. And if you sit or stand in Market Square and you look west and you look at the old Marshall Field building there, you do see on the second floor of those windows, I don't know if it's just for aesthetic purposes, but there is some sort of, gated iron gate that comes out over each one of those second story windows, giving a look or a feel of some sort of second story, small, albeit small, terrace area off of each one of those second story of the Marshall Fields building. So it gives that sort of look and feel. And
Juliet balcony or something.
yeah, and maybe it's a facade type balcony, but it certainly looks like that when you look at it from the outside, and I encourage you to take a look at it, because I remember doing so, because we did, it was discussed, I remember, and I'm looking at you, Commissioner Moorhead, when this came up the last time, that there was a good deal of discussion from some of the then commissioners in regards to, the look and the feel of the terraces, and so I think there is somewhat of a precedent from what I could tell around town, but it certainly further discussion I'm sure will come on this topic. Any other questions? We might have to be here a long time with the public that's here this evening to comment on this, but are there any comments or anybody calling in?
Let me read the phone number. 847-810-3689. If you are listening and would like to comment on this introduction of this petition, now is the time to call. Maybe we'll wait 30 seconds.
Certainly like to thank Mr. Whitmer for your presentation, and are there any other comments from commissioners on this project? Anything that you guys can think of that you'd like to see other than what's already been stated before this comes up again? I certainly would encourage the commissioners that aren't here to certainly listen to this and follow up with any questions they may have with staff.
And I would again offer to the three of you, if you have other thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, please email me or call me, and I will pass those on to the developer.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Nothing else. I don't see anybody here in the audience that's on any other topic. But are there any other action items, Kathy?
I did send a poll out earlier today, just looking forward to July, August, and September. I anticipate that we'll have agenda items. I also anticipate that we will be here going forward and unless something changes. So we will keep in touch with you, but it's good to see you all, and welcome Commissioner Davey.
At this point, do you anticipate, thank you, Kathy, do you anticipate a July meeting?
I do, yes.
Okay,
And
okay.
I put the date in the email. I
Yeah.
don't remember it off the top of my head.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Do we have to do a motion to adjourn?
Officially, yes, but
Officially? Second. Accepted. Thank you.
thank you all.